Let's create with some clear casting resin and the new IOD molds from the Christmas release. This is Magic Resin. It's a Canadian company, and this is their art and craft epoxy. First thing is to warm up these bottles of resin. You want it to flow freely. Okay, so I have my resin bottles in warm water because this resin is pretty thick. So you have to heat it up so that it's in better shape to work with and to pour. So I'm just going to pull this one out. The A part seems to be the thickest always. I'm gonna leave that there for now. So I'm gonna pour a full cup. I technically need 242 milliliters, but I'm gonna fill up my whole cup here up to 250. So I'm gonna pour this at 125 with this first one. And now for part B, which is the hardener. And you want to make sure that you're pouring the exact amount of A and B together. So you're not messing that up. Okay. So now, instead of using one of those little sticks, I'm actually going to use a big silicone spatula, and I'm going to stir this in some warm water. So with this resin, you get this little instruction sheet inside. So for those of you that are watching from Canada, this is a Canadian company. Magic Resin is a Canadian company. So I have used both their tabletop epoxy and their art, which is, the tabletop epoxy is for very thin pours. It works really good on top of coasters, stuff like that. It's for very thin, less than 1/4 of an inch thick. The art and craft resin is for up to 1/2 inch thick. So, but this, you need to stir this for 4 to 5 minutes. And you want to make sure that you're scraping the sides here once in a while to get it mixed properly. And you probably can't see through the camera, but it's still got this like swirly look in there. So it's nowhere near being mixed enough yet. So I'm just going to stir away. It's best to really time yourself and make sure you're doing the 4 to 5 minutes. You want to make sure it's mixed thoroughly, because if it's not, it will not cure properly. I learned that the hard way, just assuming I had mixed it long enough, and I hadn't. Another thing is, if it's cool, if the resin is cool, it's a lot harder to mix it in. So warming it up, and I found that having it sitting in a warm water bath as I'm stirring seems to help. I'm no longer seeing those swirls in there, so it's pretty close to being mixed. I'm just wanting to make sure. And you don't want to like whip it. You don't want to introduce more air bubbles than you need. Just making sure those sides are mixed in well. Okay, I'm going to carefully lift this out And move that out of the way. I just don't want that to fall over with the weight of that spatula, so I'm just gonna move it. So I'm going to be pouring the Les Cloches mold, and this one all in takes 154 milliliters of product. I was going to pour the Bibelot, but now I think I'm going to show you, because this Angelic Tapers is the hardest mold I found pouring with the clear resin. But after many experiments and frustrations, I think because this one is so super detailed that the displacement issue is really common with this one, whereas these are kind of more open. You will get some bubbles in here, but what I found to alleviate that is this is a little mister bottle, and what I have in it is 70% rubbing alcohol. And what I found is if I mist the molds first, especially the detailed parts with the alcohol, this mister doesn't work perfectly. But the alcohol helps that displacement happen properly. And solves a little bit of an air bubble issue. So I'm just gonna pour some in there. I'm not worried about filling it right to the top right now. I just want to get some resin in there. And let's get some poured in this. Now these ones, oh, this is not pouring good for me this time at all. It's wanting to just ooze out the side of my little container here, so that's annoying. You also want to make sure that your surface is really as level as you can get it. Because this resin takes 24 hours to cure, you don't want your surface to be off level, because it will just end up kind of spilling out. Whoops. Another thing with the resins is your work area needs to be warm. This specific resin calls for 24 degrees as your ambient temperature. So I'm just using this little spatula to just kind of push into those areas that the resin isn't flowing into by itself. Just because of that displacement thing too. You're pouring a liquid into a dry piece, so it tends to kind of want to don't know what the word is, pillow and not flow as easily. Okay, I think I've got it in there pretty good. And I have a little bit left, but I'm not 100% sure how much I have left in here. I have about 40 milliliters, so let's put it in this big one. And this isn't a super detailed one, so I'm not worried about spritzing that alcohol in here first. And maybe this little bitty. Another thing, you do not want to scrape out your container as you're pouring. Just in case you didn't get those sides mixed in properly, if you start scraping your product out of here, you're probably going to end up with some issues. So I'm just going to stick my spatula back in here and let that sit somewhere. These are just your regular baby wipes, but I've poured a bottle of alcohol inside. So these are really saturated with rubbing alcohol, and it helps clean up any of this little resin mess that I make as I'm creating. Okay, so this worked really, really well. Spritzing the alcohol into these really detailed molds is a huge, huge help. So you can either, I use both. My gloves are covered, so I'm giving up on those before I transfer little resin bitties all over the place. This resin does recommend, I just read it. I just want to read you what it says. So, okay, here. After pouring, you can quickly pass a blowtorch a few inches over the resin to pop all the extra bubbles. So the really important parts of that sentence are quickly pass and a few inches over the resin. So you don't want to take your torch and be just aiming it like this right on top and close and holding it there. The point is to just quickly pass it over and it pops all those little bubbles. So I have used that with no problems, and I learned the hard way that you do get problems if you don't do this properly. Actually, I'm not, yeah, I'm good. I locked it. So this is just a quick pass, and it's just bursting all those bubbles. Super easy. All the little surface bubbles are gone. There's some dust and lint in there, but, or you can spritz the alcohol, and it actually does the exact same thing and does not affect your mold, or doesn't affect your resin curing. I forgot about this one over here. This actually works really well. The alcohol works really well. So if you're more comfortable with that versus a heat tool or the blowtorch, just go ahead with that. I've got some excess resin that's just kind of sitting on and over my micro rim right here. So I'm just gently going in and cleaning it off the micro rim just so I have that nice finished edge. And I kind of look from all angles to make sure that I have everything covered. So I can see that my table is actually leaning a little bit this way, because all of my resin tends to be sitting on this end. So I'm just going to very, very carefully stick something like these 2 sticks from transfers underneath the legs of my table. Okay. So now I just give it a little chance to redistribute. And because my eyesight is a little wonky, and there you go. So that is pouring your clear resin. So you do still want to make sure that your room is warm and don't touch them. Let these sit for 24 hours. Even you can come in and check in 12 hours, but if you mess around with them too early, you end up causing some ripples when you're taking them out. Like I think, so this is one that I poured. It's already got a clear coat sprayed on top and it looks really, really good. Like there's a couple little bubbles, but once you've either decoupaged on the back or whatever, that's gonna look really good. It's minor. This one, this is the one that I did a video on this one, and you can see in certain lights like that, see the ripples? And that you can feel that on the surface. And that is from both an improperly cured resin, because it's actually still flexible. I can bend this one. Not a lot, it's pretty sturdy, but I can still move it. And yeah, improperly cured resin, and I demolded it too early, which is what caused these ripples, and they're kind of permanent there. But it gives it character. I'm still going to use it. I like it. I'm not going to waste it. So now we wait, and then once these are all set up, we will paint or decoupage or put transfers. There's so many options you can do with these molds. Okay, so these have been, it hasn't been 24 hours, but it's been close. Maybe 19, 20 hours. Anyways, they are set. So to pop them out, I'm just going to bend the mold back and then just pop them out. See, they turned out really, really well. No issues. And they have that frosty finish on them just from the texture in the mold, because the mold isn't glossy. So it does give you that little bit of a frosty, but once you, I'll show you on the same one. This one has a clear coat put on it. So that's the difference. There are no bubbles in these. They're perfect. Now these are, for me, notoriously hard to cast just because of all of the detail. And these ones turned out perfectly. Like, I don't think there's any air bubbles at all in there. So that is by spritzing the rubbing alcohol. And like I said, I just used just what I had handy here, which is this from Dollarama. It's 70% alcohol. I just poured a little bit in this little spritzer bottle, and I just missed it on the molds beforehand. So yeah, they came out perfectly. There's one little air bubble in there, but that's minor because as a comparison, these are all of the angelic tapers that I was practicing on. So let's just use the back. Check out the bubbles on that one. Can you see all the bubbles? Like right on the end of her nose. It's just full. And that's just from putting the resin, pouring the resin into a dry mold. Misting it with alcohol makes all the difference in the world. I'm trying to pick that up. If you compare these two, sorry, that's a pretty big difference. The one on the right is just, it's perfect. So mist your molds with alcohol first. The alcohol does not affect the resin, at least the resin that I'm using, which is magic resin, if you remember from earlier. So again, this is a Canadian company. I don't know if it's available in the US, but it is available to us. So I think these turned out good. These tapers are really pretty to use as ornaments, I think. Make them as a tag. You can hang them on gifts. They're just super pretty. They look like, when you cast them with clear resin, they look like icicles. And then there's these two extras from the Bibelo. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And these are very textured. These molds have a lot of texture on them, and they're like that on purpose. But also with these, when you give them a clear coat, they're just beautiful. But you can decoupage behind these, like a reverse decoupage like I did with this one. Or you can paint them and put transfers on, or you don't have to paint them to put a transfer on, like especially these ones. Yeah, all kinds of things you can do. So that's how they turned out. So I will also have a blog post about the resin with all of the experiments that I did, all my trials and tribulations. I will explain it out and have some pictures so you can see what to do and what not to do. All right.